Okay, so I'll be talking about symbolic theories and perspectives. These theories' main focus are on artifacts, values, underlying assumptions, and organizational culture and identity. So, the organizational culture theory, this theory is exactly what you think it is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's the culture of an agency. So, like any workplace, over time, the employees will consciously or unconsciously develop a way of doing or running things. So, Edgar Sheen describes the organizational culture theory as shared basic assumptions. To further explain this, the chapter gives an example of starting at a new job and not fully understanding like why the staff does something a certain way when it might make perfect sense to somebody else to do it a different way. Um, Specifically, that new employee. So the chapter also mentions how being aware of certain patterns within an organization is also very important to understanding the culture. It also talked about how employees may react emotionally when questioned about why things run the way they do, because they might take it as an attack if they've been doing it that way for a certain amount of time. So, Sheen came up with 3 levels of culture. The first is artifacts, which is the climate of the organization. So, these would include physical and social environment, which includes signs, office space, things like that, use of physical space, so location and condition of waiting rooms and private spaces, organizational outputs, which are treatment plans and reports. Language would include any jargon or certain phrases or code type language that they might, like staff members might use with each other. Items on the wall, so decorations, posters, stuff like that. And lastly, behavior from the members of the organization, how they get along with each other and their clients. For level 2, we look at values and beliefs. So these are pretty straightforward levels of culture. So you have cognitively transformed into a belief. When holding that value works, some values are transformed into assumptions. Like so, you have a certain value, it just becomes the way that they do it. They do things there, and espoused values. Level 3, the last level, is basic underlying assumptions. So things are taken for granted that one finds little variation in a unit. Theories in use, so what type of stuff they value. And it's often hard to assess whether one is dealing with organizational culture or versus professional culture or disciplinary culture or regional variations, or there's a whole bunch of different things that could go on there. So the chapter goes on to talk about Sheen and his beliefs on creating a cohesive environment within an organization. So those would be develop common language and means of communication, so staff members are always aware of like what people are talking about. Establish group unit boundaries, recognize power status dimensions so you know who's above you and who to go to. Develop norms of appropriate behavior between members, which is also goes under the boundaries. Determine how to award success and discipline behavior, and find ways to explain uncontrollable events. So, in order to create an atmosphere that accepts diversity, Cross made a list of responsibilities that administrators must assume. So, they must promote tolerance, be a role model of respect and appreciation, value empathy, promote trust, goodwill, encourage collaboration, work towards synthesis, and create synergy. So, all of those qualities will make a leader that promotes diversity and respects culture within the agency. The next part of the chapter talks about the excellence approach, which is a bias for action. So, just the preference for doing anything, staying close to the customer, so catering to them, autonomy and entrepreneurship. So, breaking the company into small, different mini companies and encouraging the members to think independently and do their own thing. Productivity through people, hands-on, value-driven. So make sure the administration is keeping in touch with what everybody's doing. Stick to the knitting. Simple form, lean staff. So small layers of administration and just a small amount of people like at the top. And simultaneous loose type preferences. So making sure that the values of the company are at the forefront. So next is the sense-making theory. This is pretty straightforward as well. It's also about how people process their information. So people take in everything around them, they process the information, and then they form a conclusion about what they've found. Pretty straightforward. And lastly, the chapter closes with the organizational learning theory. The main points are to gather, process, and share information within an organization. It also touches on how leaders need to provide guidelines and promote incentives to guide and encourage employees to improve or advance within their organization. So, yeah.